you may also like. A show about the things you may also like. Things like...
Before wine, I'm guessing there was radio?
There was radio. And, radio was my chosen career.
What did you do in radio?
Well, I started on air in a small town in Columbus. So I was actually a nightclub DJ for about 2 or 3 years. And I'm from Denver, but the club I worked for back then had, they owned like 7 clubs around the country, and one was in Columbus, Ohio. So they'd sent me out to Columbus, and I was out there for about a year, and then they shut the club down. But at that same time, I was sending out tapes. There's in the Midwest, there's all these little stations. So my first gig was at WQIO in Mount Vernon, Ohio, and I would drive 55 miles one way to work overnights on the weekend for $3.35 an hour. That was minimum wage when I started. So from there, I brought it back to Denver and started. I got a gig here in Denver, and then worked into a full-time on-air position. And then eventually I was made the production and imaging director. Yeah.
So in a moment of coincidence, because there are thousands and thousands of radio stations across the United States, and hopefully I'm not breaking any laws by mentioning this, but as you know, I'm a voiceover artist. I also do radio imaging, and I just did a rebrand for WQIO earlier this week.
Oh, you're kidding!
Crazy?
What? Yeah. What's the what's the format? I'd love to know.
It's called the Super Q. 103.5.
Yeah, the Super Q. Oh my God, it was the Super Q, and this was 1987-ish. Yeah, 1987. The Super Q, WQIO.
That's phenomenal. That of all the stations in America, that came up, and I just done some work for them earlier this week. That's nuts.
Yeah, that's nuts. So here's a funny. I don't know. It's funny to me, but so when I first started there, they had me training. They had to train me with the overnight guy, and then they finally left me on my own. But the overnight guy, his name was John Zellner, so he and then he would do some kind of late night shift there overnight, and then he would drive to the south end of Columbus, completely on the south side, and work a midday shift at another station. So, okay, then flash forward to the early 2000s, and I'm working here in Denver for and the cluster's owned by CBS Radio. And I'm going through the email database, and I see John Zellner, and he's like VP of programming and blah blah blah. So I shoot him a note, and I just said, hey, I was this rookie green guy you trained back in the day, and just I don't know where he's at now, but
he's at iHeart, and he's a VP, and he works with a lot of talent. He's a great guy. I met him about 5 or 6 years ago, and again, there's another coincidence and another name, and you and I have been working together for years, and look at all these coincidences.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a great guy, and held my hand there.
You found your way back to Denver, and you did some work on the radio in Denver too?
Yeah, came back to Denver, then started part-time at a local station here in Denver. Eventually, that they bought another station, and they flipped it to Alice 106. So this was in the early 90s. So I started swinging. I was like a swing guy between both stations, just picking up shifts, vacations, all that. And then they fired the afternoon guy, put me in just to fill in, then kept me. I stayed on afternoons at Alice in the 90s, and then went on vacation, came back, and I was the night guy. So one of those great radio stories. Go on vacation, didn't get fired, but was basically demoted to the night guy. And then 5 months later, I got fired.
Tell me about your passion for wine. How did that develop? At what age, and what was the gateway wine?
Oh, wow. So my dad started making wine. He grew up making wine Let me back up a second. My grandfather was an Italian immigrant, came to Colorado, he worked the coal mines down near in the southern end of the state, near Trinidad, Colorado. A lot of coal mines around there. So all the old Italians made their own wine. So that's how my dad learned. He grew up making wine. And then when I was in high school, he started making wine in the garage. He's like, hey, I want to make wine again. And excuse me. So started ordering grapes, making wine, made a lot of bad wine. And then, hang on.
Go ahead.
It's the most I've talked in a long time here. Anyway, so we started making wine, and then going through the 80s, we made wine every year. Kind of changed up the recipe, if different grapes, and that's really how I got introduced to wine. We stopped for a while because I was moving around the country and stuff. But then the house I live in now, when I moved into that house, I told my dad, hey, let's start making wine again. So we did. I took a more modern approach to it. He had the old school Italian thing going on. I just took a more modern approach to winemaking, primary fermenter, keeping everything clean. And so really that's what happened. I was just doing that, got fired when they flipped our station country. That was in 2005. And I told my wife, hey, we should open an urban winery in our neighborhood. And that's how it happened. My gateway wine, there used to be, when I was growing up, there used to be a lot of Rianiti around because it was sweeter and easy drinking. But then, and in fact, my wife, when we were dating, I invited her over for dinner, and I went and bought a bottle of white Zinfandel, and then she showed up with a bigger bottle of white Zinfandel, and we drank them, but that's really where I started drinking.
What are some of the challenges involved in an urban winery?
Oh man,
just as compared to something that might be
right
out in the hills or in the mountains, but here you are in town.
Exactly. The challenge has always been to educate the public on the difference between winemaking, which is the manufacturing of the wine, and the vineyard, the grape growing, the agriculture. So they don't have to be together. We have this vision. There's this, romanticism about the wine industry, rolling Tuscan hills, and the guy, and you're sniffing your wine out in the vineyard, and really, that's the case for a lot of wineries. They have their own vineyards, but there's plenty of wineries in wine country that are near vineyards that don't own vineyards, and they buy grapes and they bring it into a warehouse and they crush, they ferment, they bottle, and then sell the wine.
For other winemakers around the world, or people who are just generally interested in wine and making their own wine, how do you describe to them the climate in Colorado?
Typically, I have always described it as a hot climate. Even though we have the high elevation, so we have some of the highest vineyards in the world. The main grape growing region in Colorado is called the Grand Valley. We have 2 AVAs. That's one of our 2 AVAs. The vineyards are 4,600 to 5,000 feet. Then our second AVA, West Elks, the elevation is like 6,000 feet. So the 2 climates are different, but because we have a bit of a shorter growing season in general than other growing areas, it gets hot. And the temperature swing is like hot days, cool nights, which you need in grape growing, but the temperature pushes towards 100. 95, 100 degrees in Palisade. That's the town, but cools down to the low 60s. So you've got that great swing in temperature. But those hot temperatures, because we try to let reds traditionally, this is without climate change, but traditionally we would let those big reds need to hang just a little bit longer in order to get overall ripeness, like to get acid down. And so a lot of times that sugar content would go up. So you'd get these big, some really big reds coming out of Colorado.
And you mentioned the temperature swings. There have been some days that have been in the, close to 100, and then 24 to 36 hours later, you could be down in the 30s and 40s, depending on how nasty Mother Nature could be. How do you deal with all that?
Yeah, well, I haven't seen that drastic from going up from the 90s down to the 30s, but in October, so in 2019 and 2020, we had 2 years in a row in October where October is beautiful. I mean, it's harvest season. We get these 70s, 80 degrees, lows down in the 50s. So you're getting some really good ripening. Of course, you could say some bad weather would come in and go, wow, there's a freeze coming. But in those 2 years, we had it went down below 30. It was in the 20s, and it killed the vines down to the ground. So that type of thing, you deal with it with a lot of vineyards are planting hybrid grapes, which are a cross between vinifera, your regular winemaking grapes, and these cold hardy varietals that are being developed at like University of Minnesota. So they can withstand a temperature swing like that. That's some of the things that we deal with.
Give me the best white and the best red. Which, if you're going to present that as these are the best Colorado wines, what's going to be the grape for the white, and which one's going to be, what kind of varietal is it going to be for the red?
Okay, so there are a lot of...
And I understand your answer might be different than somebody else in another part of Colorado.
Yeah, sure. Their Riesling is a great grape that's historically done very well here in Colorado. We've had world-class Rieslings come out of the state. It's still one of my favorites. And then if we were going to pick a single red, I would say Cabernet Franc is still phenomenal. So we still Cabernet Franc, it always has that earthiness, good structure, not as tannic as Cabernet Sauvignon, but it really thrives well here in the state.
What makes Colorado wine so special?
Well, it's the winemakers.
Clearly.
No, we just have, we have this great sunshine and, great weather conditions, and the wines that come out of Colorado are they're very fruit forward and robust and ready to drink. So, and not that they won't lay down. It just depends on the winemaking style. Some wineries are making wines that will sell her nicely over the next 10, 15 years. So,
what about the relationship that you have with other Colorado wineries, like say, Kingman Estates or Carboy or Plum Creek? How do you collaborate, maybe work together or share information to make the industry better?
Yeah, we all get along, so there's wineries here on the Front Range, which is the Denver, Boulder, up and down the corridor, going north and south. And then you've got a lot of wineries over on the western side of the state, and that's where the grapes are being grown. So we all work together, especially here on the Front Range, recommending people in the tasting room. We recommend other wineries to go to. One of the wineries here in Denver, you mentioned Carboy. They host a rosé tasting event every year, which other Colorado wineries are invited to. Blanchard Family Wines, they're downtown. They have a couple other locations around the state. They host a Colorado Wine Walk 3 times this year, twice in Denver, once up in Fort Collins. So these are the type of things we're doing to get the word out.
Okay, so you're going to help me out on a few of the other things that you've talked about on your podcast before. Things that make me cringe or go, I'm not sure I would like that, but yeah, they exist and they're good, such as box wine. Like box wine is something that I think, I don't know that I want that, but maybe I do. You
do, definitely, because box wine is not, It's not the way it used to be. I mean, you look at the way packaging has evolved over the years, and there's obviously, there's canned wine and box wine is not just, Franzia or Sutterholm. Nothing wrong if you drink those, okay? But there are higher quality wines being put in boxes and pricing to go along with that too.
Why are they packaged in boxes?
Well, for environmental reasons, for one, saves on packaging, shipping bottles across the world.
Pricey, heavy. Yeah.
Yes, it just cuts down on the weight. You can ship more wine for the same amount if you're filling a container. Plus, the wine is convenient, doesn't go bad. I think a box would probably last a couple of months in your refrigerator, and it's always fresh. Every glass, every time you squeeze.
What about some of the derivatives, aside from wine? So if, let's say, I go to Spain, there's parts that, now I can get into some sherry. And if I go to Portugal, I can get into port. If I go to the north of Spain, there is cider. And Colorado's got some cider too. So what are some of the derivatives, including cider, in Colorado?
Well, so we have 170-ish wineries in Colorado. So, and of that, cideries are included. And I want to say there's 25, 30-ish of those are cideries. I'm not exactly sure on the number, but, and then mead too is another product being made in Colorado. So, so the cider, I love the cider industry because they have a more aggressive, experimental side of them, more like beer. So a lot of different flavors, different things being infused, and so that's the kind of things going on.
The winery is more than just wine. There's a lot that goes on there, including, and I love this, and I haven't been, I can only envision, there's a studio where you can record podcasts. There's music and events. There's food. There's wine, but there's also, a few cocktails. Sometimes I think you've got some sangria on the menu, amongst some other things. Tell me about everything about the winery that doesn't have to do with wine that somebody might not know about.
Okay, so, there's a lot.
But it's cultural more than anything, right? Like, it's wine, but it's also food, music, and friends.
It is. It really is. So live music has been a part of our winery here from the beginning, and the bands they're local bands, which really drives the community out. We've always been community driven. That's part of it. Offering wine-based cocktails for those who don't necessarily like wine has been part of that. We developed a wine-based cocktail list quite a few years ago, and some of the favorites stay around. We recently, last summer, we added a new cocktail to simulate a Aperol Spritz, because spirits are not allowed here under my license. We can't have beer or spirits on the premise. So we have a good version of that. The food, we do some food in house with some traditional Italian charcuterie and Italian sausage, and then we have a barbecue food truck that comes in regularly. Also, wine and cheese pairing. We do a wine and cheese class once a month with a local cheese shop. Lots of other events that are network driven that we host.
So your studio looks way better than my studio. I can only dream to get my studio as nice looking as yours. The one thing I do have behind me is a wine fridge, at which point I'm going to go and reach into the wine fridge and pull something out.
Oh, yeah. Let's see what you got. Oh, look at that. That's a beautiful bottle right there. Made its way into Canada. I love it.
It did. We got it back, and this is the 2022 Sangiovese, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking this is probably a good time to drink it. Not right now, but this weekend we've got Canada Day on Monday, and I think next Thursday, as we record this, it will be Independence Day in the United States. So this weekend or next weekend will be the right time to drink this. Paul, what am I going to pair with this to eat?
Okay, before you do that, plus Canada beating Peru in the Copa the other day was fantastic. So you may have another reason to celebrate.
Well, it's too bad. Yeah, it's too bad the referee didn't bring out any of his cards. At least he couldn't find them.
That's right. All right. So Colorado, Sangiovese, let's say this. Italian varietals don't grow very well in Colorado, okay? We just need a little bit longer growing season for them. And I stumbled across this vineyard in 2016. A guy had planted it in 2006. So I've been working with them ever since. And every year it would just not ripen up correctly. So I used to blend it. I used to use it as the base for a blend on a label I have, and had very good success with that label. I've made a lot of rosé from it because of the growing conditions. It lend itself to rosé. But in 2022, for whatever reason, the grapes ripened up to a little bit higher than they normally do, but the acid dropped way down. So we had this really good balance, and that is the first time that I bottled a Colorado Sangiovese. So it is very traditional. I would say it's Italian-like. It's tart cherry, very perfumey, just classic Sangiovese. So that's going to pair well with tomato-based dishes. Because tomatoes are high acid, and and then you technically a cherry-ish flavor in tomatoes, but they're going to pair up nicely with the equal in that wine. High acid, you want to pair high acid with high acid foods, high acid wine, high acid food. So
I love it. So I'll dig into it this weekend. Just keeping with the football, Italy does play at some point. So I'll open up the bottle when Italy is playing their football match.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, I looked it up. They play Switzerland at 2 a.m. this Sunday, our time here. So I will not be up.
Okay. Paul, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast to talk about wine and Denver Wine Radio.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt, for having me.
Thanks for listening to You May Also Like. You may also like our website at youmayalsolike.net. The show is produced by Evan Straminsky and built for your ears by everyone at the Sound Off Media Company.